Welcome to our animated philosophy series, where we explore timeless concepts in a modern context. Today we're diving into one of the most profound ideas in philosophy, Immanuel Kant's notion of space and time as pure forms of intuition. Now, this might sound complicated at first, but I'm going to break it down in a way that makes sense to everyone. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a clearer understanding of how Kant sees space and time, and why he thinks they are essential to everything we experience. We typically think of space and time as things that exist in the world, something out there. Space is where objects are, and time is the flow in which events happen, right? But Kant says space and time aren't actually out there at all. They aren't objects we observe or things we experience like a table or a car. Instead, Kant argues that space and time are what he calls pure forms of intuition. This means that they exist within our minds as preconditions for how we experience the world. In other words, space and time are not things we learn about from the world. They are ways that our minds structure all our experiences. Before anything even happens to us, before we see an object or experience an event, our minds are already organizing that experience in terms of space and time. Imagine you're watching a ball rolling across the floor. You see the ball moving from one point to another. This is an experience of motion. But how do you actually perceive this? It's because your mind automatically organizes the ball's movement within the framework of space and time. You see it moving through space, from point A to point B, and over time, from one moment to the next. Now here's the key point. Kant says that space and time are not properties of the ball itself, or even the floor. These aren't things the ball or the floor have. They are instead the conditions that your mind uses to make sense of the ball's movement. They are the lenses through which you experience the world. So Kant would argue that without these mental frameworks of space and time, you wouldn't be able to perceive the ball moving at all. It's as if your mind is the stage, and space and time are the scenery that allows everything else to happen on that stage. And this is what Kant means when he says that space and time are a priori conditions of experience. A priori is just a fancy term for something that is known or exists before experience. It's not something you learn through experience, it's already there, built into your mind. Space and time structure every possible experience you can have, whether you're aware of it or not. Now, let's contrast this with what Kant calls empirical reality. Most of the things we know about the world, like the color of a car or the sound of music, come from empirical reality. These are things we learn from experience. But Kant argues that space and time don't work this way. They aren't empirical, you don't learn them by observing the world. Instead, they are the necessary conditions that make observation possible in the first place. Think about it like this. Imagine trying to experience the world without space. You wouldn't be able to distinguish objects from one another because you wouldn't have any way of separating them. They wouldn't occupy different places. And without time, you wouldn't experience events as happening in sequence. Everything would be an incomprehensible blur. So Kant argues space and time are the preconditions for any experience at all. They allow us to organize sensory information in a way that makes sense. And here's where Kant's argument becomes really fascinating. He's not just saying that space and time are like tools our minds use to understand the world. He's saying they are necessary. You can't have experience without them. This is why he calls space and time pure forms of intuition. They are universal, everyone has them, and they shape everything we perceive. Let's return to the example of motion. When you see the ball rolling across the floor, you're not just seeing a random series of snapshots. You experience it as continuous movement, because your mind organizes the sensory information within the framework of time. Similarly, you can track the ball's location because your mind is applying the concept of space. Kant would say this isn't something you choose to do, it's automatic, and it's the only way we can have any coherent experience of the world. This is why Kant believes space and time underpin all human knowledge. They are the building blocks of how we experience anything at all. No space and time, no coherent experience. And because they are a priori, existing in the mind before any experience, they apply universally to everything we perceive. To sum up, Kant's notion of space and time as pure forms of intuition means that these are the frameworks that our minds use to organize all our sensory experiences. They aren't out there in the world, they're built into us. And because they're a priori, they make experience possible in the first place. Without space and time, there would be no way to perceive motion, distinguish objects, or even have a coherent sense of events happening around us. Kant's insight is revolutionary because it changes the way we think about knowledge and experience. Instead of just passively receiving information from the world, our minds actively shape that information in fundamental ways, through the lenses of space and time. And that, according to Kant, is what makes knowledge and experience possible for us. So next time you see something as simple as a ball rolling across the floor, remember, it's not just happening out there in the world. Your mind is working hard, behind the scenes, organizing that experience into something you can understand. Thank you for learning with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more insights into similar echoes.